Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, wherever you're listening from. It's me, Lisa, and this is Untitled, the podcast without a name. Last time I spoke about physical and also emotional resilience, about structure, standards, and also stability. Today I want to talk about emotional self regulation, and not just as a personal trait, but more as a psychological skill. So for me, emotional self regulation is one of the most important skills when it comes to healthy and stable relationships because it shapes how we relate to others and also to ourselves and how we function professionally as well, and how stable our overall well being is over time. And the interesting thing is that emotional self regulation only really becomes visible under tension when there is stress, right? We all know that. So it's easy to appear calm and easygoing when nothing is bothering you. It's easy to communicate well when there is no disagreement. It's easy to describe yourself as self aware when you are not being challenged. But in my experience, the real growth often happens in the closest relationships. So the right person doesn't just comfort you and leave everything the way it is. They also challenge you, not to change who you are, but to help you see yourself more clearly or from a different angle, right? So in healthy relationships, people hold up a mirror for each other. And sometimes that mirror is uncomfortable. But I think that's often exactly where growth begins and happens. So let's come back to the main point. Stress activates the nervous system, and activation reveals your own conditioning. And by conditioning, I mean everything that has been wired into you over years. So, what you've learned, and sometimes even, over generations. So, reactions you have learned, your coping strategies, the way you defend yourself, for example. And I would say you don't really know someone or even yourself until the nervous system is activated or gets triggered. So when you feel criticized, when you feel rejected, when you feel unseen or not seen or not heard, when expectations are not met, that's when patterns usually show up. You are not always in control of your emotions, but regulation is about whether you are in control of your behavior. So, regulation refers to the ability to experience emotion without being hijacked by it. Let's put it that way. So it's the difference between, let's say, feeling anger and acting aggressively. And emotions themselves are not the problem, I would say. In my opinion, they are data, and your brain and your body can use it. So when the nervous system shifts into, let's say, fight or flight or freeze or survival mode, whatever you want to call it, behavior becomes reactive instead of intentional. And there's always a small pause between, these two things. And what happens in that pause, that matters. And self-regulation is not suppression, and people often confuse those two. Suppression means pushing emotions down or to the side, and regulation means allowing emotions to move through you without, let's say, projecting them onto other people. So some people cry, other people step away from the situation, right? Everyone has different outlets. And that's fine. So the real question is not whether you feel. The question is what you do after you feel. Do you process the emotion, or do you project it onto the situation or onto another person? And I would say projection is one of the most common defense mechanisms. And we are guilty of that sometimes because we externalize what we feel instead of tolerating it internally and sit with it. And in the moment, that behavior often makes sense, but over time, it just creates more tension. It's just like a quick relief, and but it's not healthy. It's not a healthy dynamic. In the long run, it creates more problems. So many people believe they are emotionally strong because they don't react loudly, or they don't cry, or they don't express themselves too much. But emotional suppression is not regulation. It is often avoidance, actually. So silence can be regulation. Distance can be regulation in a healthy way, a healthy space. But sometimes silence and distance can also become punishment. And the behavior alone does not define what it is. The awareness and the intention behind it do. And that's really important. So stress does not remove responsibility, right? Let's say being activated or being triggered explains the behavior, but it does not excuse it. Your nervous system response is real. Your emotions are valid, but how you treat people or how you behave is still your responsibility. So sometimes people experience difficult circumstances and struggles and all of that. And life can be really complicated, but those things do not cancel responsibility. At the same time, holding people accountable does not mean punishing them. Accountability is not about making someone suffer. So, healthy accountability simply means recognizing the impact and taking responsibility for it. Like saying, this is what happened, and this is how it affected someone, and this is what I'm willing to take responsibility for, without turning it into blame or punishment. And there is a big difference because accountability is really about clarity, and clarity creates the possibility for repair and doing it better. So accountability is feedback, and it's the feedback you get out of it without shaming someone or yourself. So instead of saying you're too sensitive, it becomes um, when you reacted that way, it shut down the conversation and made it difficult for me to continue talking. Easy as that. This distinction matters. So shame escalates defensiveness, and clarity invites reflection. So the conflict itself is not the problem. In fact, the absence of conflict is often avoidance. It's not a healthy dynamic. What predicts long-term stability is not the lack of disagreement, fights, or conflict. It's the ability to repair, right? The ability to return after a disagreement, after a fight, after a difficult situation. So let's say I come to you and I say, I reacted in a way that wasn't okay. I apologize. Let me try again. I want to do better. And I also want to add something, personal, because emotional self-regulation is not something I have perfectly mastered at this point. And I can observe myself often. So there are situations where I regulate myself very well. Let's say in professional environments, in difficult conversations at work, or even in conflicts with other people in general, I can stay calm, reflective, and most of the time intentional in how I respond. And even when it comes to family, because I had to learn over time how to create emotional boundaries and separate myself from situations when needed. But I noticed that it becomes much more difficult for me when the situation involves a person who is the closest to me. So sometimes my daughter, and many times the person I'm romantically involved with. And I know sometimes the relationships that matter the most also triggers your nervous system the most. And not because they are unhealthy, because we care deeply about these people, right? So your reaction is not a sign that something is wrong with you or the other person or the relationship or the dynamic. It simply means that this relationship is emotionally significant, I would say. And that's where the nervous system reacts completely different. So when a relationship is very close, when the emotional investment is deep, and when the connection really matters to you, situations can create much more pressure internally. And that's what I experience. And that's exactly where regulation can become hard. So even though I understand the concept I'm talking about, I still catch myself in so many moments where I slip and I react in a way that I later regret or I reflect on, and I think, okay, that was not really the best way. It happens. And that's actually part of the process, and it's part of life, and it's part of relationships. So self-regulation is not about never making mistakes. It's about noticing when you did, reflecting on it, and choosing to repair and to do better next time. I think that makes sense. So the people who matter the most also have the greatest ability to trigger your nervous system. That's probably the law of life. And emotional regulation also requires a lot of tolerance, distress tolerance. So let's say it is the capacity to stay present while your nervous system wants to escape and run away. And sometimes stepping away is healthy, but not as punishment or silent treatment, as regulation. So you can return calm and grounded instead of reactive. Because if you don't regulate yourself, you will create more tension and more problems in the long run. And the goal is not perfection. We are not perfect. None of us is perfect. The real question is what happens next. Do you reflect? Do you repair? Do you take responsibility? So regulation means being able to say, I was overwhelmed, and yeah, that was not really who I want to be. I apologize. Let me try again. I really want to do better. And that alone reflects a lot of self-awareness and responsibility and emotional maturity. And it's just what it is. You don't truly know your own character until you observe yourself under stress and pressure. So ask yourself, who are you when you are wrong? Who are you when someone disagrees with you? Who are you when your ego feels threatened? Developing the capacity to regulate yourself in a way that does not harm yourself or others is one of the most powerful skills you can build. And emotional self-regulation is not about being calm all the time. It is about being responsible with your triggers and your activation and your reactions, your behavior. And maybe that is the real test. Not how calm we are when life is easy. Who we are when things become difficult. And maybe that is something worth reflecting on today and tomorrow. So, how you respond once you notice what is happening. The ability to pause, reflect, and repair is really what builds trust and stability and a healthy dynamic. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon in the next episode.